Now, following reports that the State House has allocated 10 billion naira in the approved 2025 budget for the installation of a solar mini grid at the presidential villa, the special advisor to President Bola Tinubu on information and strategy, Bayo Onanuga, has come to defend the project. In a video posted on X, Onanuga referenced the White House in Washington, D.C., highlighting that the U.S. presidential residence also operates partially on solar power. Let's take a look before we get into the reactions.
The solar panels in the White House, I think, are a really important message that solar is here. We are doing it. We can do a lot more. I am very bullish on the future of solar energy as a key part of our clean energy future.
The size of the array that we established here is the typical size for the average American house. Being at the White House, we do have some security concerns. We can't cover the entire roof with panels, though that would be good from an energy saving standpoint.
Every 4 minutes, some small business or homeowner is going solar. In a sense, we're going through a transition here, and the industry is going through a transition that we're just seeing the beginning of.
The president is basically doing what Americans all across the nation are doing right now. They're making the conscious choice to look for renewable energy like solar as the cheaper, cleaner, and preferred energy source for their homes and families.
You know, we need a diversified clean energy portfolio as articulated in the president's climate action plan, which we are actively engaged in now. And we also need to spur the economic sectors of the future. Last year alone, we created over 23,000 new jobs in solar energy.
Well, let's head on to Twitter. Kolawale's tweet, we're going to start with that. He says, solar power or panel is installed in the White House, not for lack of electricity, but because they're trying to reduce global warming. Why in Nigeria they want to install solar panels in Aso Rock? Because of the grid collapse and lack of electricity. The two are not the same. Somtok went on to tweet to say, Mr. Bayo, number one, Americans used American-made solar panels. Where's ours? Second, solar was 20% of the White House's electricity. How much is ours? Third, the project cost $1 million. How much is ours? They give Americans 24/7 power supply. How much do Nigerians get? These are the issues. And finally, Idris tweeting, solar mini-grid at the presidential villa is a commendable step towards sustainable governance and energy efficiency. This move reflects a strong commitment to the energy transition agenda, reduces reliance on fossil fuels, and sets an example for other institutions. Meanwhile, let's take a look at another story where 8 federal universities are now set to disconnect from the national grid and fully transition to solar power. The move under the Energizing Education program, backed by the World Bank and AFDB, aims to reduce outages, cut costs, and boost academic performances. Of course, school listed include the University of Abuja, Calabar, Maiduguri, Federal University of Agriculture, Abeokuta, the Federal University, Gashua, Nigeria Defense Academy, Kaduna, and Abubakar Tafawa Balewa University in Bauchi. Now, I would say to begin that this tweet by Bayo Onanuga, first of all, I don't think the tweet helped the case. Now, a couple of weeks ago, the Minister of Science and Technology, Uche Naji, came out to say that there was going to be an outright ban. The federal government, rather, was considering banning the importation of solar panels. Now, when that news came in, he said the aim for this was to increase local manufacturing, but RIAN kicked against it, saying, while that may be good, we need to increase local capacity first, so we do not create a bigger problem because we do not even have the capacity to produce at the rate that we should. Now, with regards to the presidency choosing to have solar panels in the system, the truth is, if these are coming from Nigerian manufacturers, that may be a good thing. But have we strengthened our manufacturers enough to provide solar panels of this capacity? I think those are the issues that Bayo should be addressing. That's Mr. Onanuga. That's what he should be addressing. As opposed to telling us how the White House uses solar panels, he always comes off as shutting Nigerians up as opposed to addressing the pertinent issues. And of course, I think the situation with the universities is quite interesting. I cannot wait to see that happen.
Okay, look, I think we discussed this subject yesterday, but it's okay. Electricity, energy supply, very important subject. And I made a point, I piggybacked on the point made by Vimbai yesterday. about productivity. That if you have electricity supply in Nigeria, you will increase productivity. Vulcanizers, roadside mechanics, artisans, they will be able to function. Those of us also who are below middle class, within the middle class, or aspiring to be part of the upper middle class or whatever, will also be able to function in this society. In other words, energy sustainability, or the phrase they use is sustainable energy, is important to productivity, and we have to continue to make that point. The second point is that we said yesterday that this issue is not about solar panel in Aso Rock. We made a point that the intelligent thing to say for the benefit of the deaf and the dumb who argue with common sense is that this is a situation in relation to electricity that the Nigerian government has to think out of Aso Rock, Aso Villa box and realize that what is important is that when you provide this sustainable energy for the benefit of the commonality of the people, you will be promoting the common good. And we insist on that point. The third point is that, look, there is an Electricity Act of 2023. If you look at that Electricity Act, which is the extant law on the subject, it talks about solar power. It talks about, the grid, the national grid, decentralizing the national grid. There are many options that the Nigerian government can look at in terms of making power available for the Nigerian people to ensure productivity. And it's not rocket science. They've done it in other countries of the world. What is problematic with this conversation is the reduction of the whole conversation to the fact that, people in Aso Rock, they can use solar power. They can have electricity. No, nobody is saying they cannot have electricity in Aso Villa. We are saying, whatever Mr. Ononuga may have said about solar power in the White House or whatever, that, look, the bigger issue is about the common good. It's about the Nigerian people. I'm sure the young lady, the young lady from Zimbabwe, that's your new title now.
That's what
you got it yesterday.
And I love it. I love that.
I embrace
the young lady from Zimbabwe who want to enjoy electricity. Adefemi here, who want to enjoy electricity. You too will like to enjoy electricity. You don't want to say, it's because somebody is in Aso Villa. That's why they can enjoy solar power. No, the subject is bigger than that. And I hope that, people who have enough common sense to understand that aspect of the argument.
All right, well, Adefemi, I believe that you also touched on this briefly yesterday, and you were speaking to obviously the possibility that there may be other reasons why this may also be put in place.
Correct. I mean, that's what we were discussing yesterday, that it would be interesting to have heard from the presidency to understand their justification for this, further than the comparison between other institutions that use solar panel. As Mr. Ononuga said, he used the White House as an example, which is true. I do think that it would have been interesting to hear, as I said yesterday, what the justifications are for the presidency to use this, because in addition to Aso Rock being the official home of the president, a lot of people also contribute and see Aso Rock as a place of work, as a place of business, because there are more people who live there and work there than just the president. So while we are talking about absolutely the access to solar panel and solar energy and us being able to harness this great resource of the sun that we have in Nigeria, it is also, I think, important for us to understand that people that we are caping for also exist at Aso Rock, and if they can benefit from it, then other people should be able to do so too. Essentially, my point yesterday, my point today is that we are all Nigerians, and there are people more than just the actual president who live and work at Aso Rock who should be able to access solar panels, and I don't think that is a bad thing.
Arriving by, or do I say young lady? Which do you prefer now?
Please, young lady.
Young lady.
Very
Young lady.
title for me.
For you, what's your stance on this? There's so many reactions.
There's several reactions, but firstly, I want to focus on the universities.
Yes.
That is an important development because we know that several universities are currently crippled because they are in darkness. The students cannot even study for exams. They're studying by candlelight. There have been several protests across the country from students protesting lights. I mean, so if we can transition the universities to solar energy, then we're thinking in the right direction. And this is the point that we're making, is that this 10 billion, let it go to universities, fine. Let it go to hospitals, no problem. Let it go to the productive sector of the economy. We're not saying that the president doesn't deserve solar. Absolutely, he should go for it. However, let's first ensure that there's energy security in Nigeria for Nigerians who need to wake up each morning to find their daily, it's not even daily 2K anymore. It's now daily 10K that you have to find because your daily 2K can't cut it anymore. So that's the point that we're making. So I always like to say two things can be true at the same time. Yes, Aso Villa can have solar power, they can have whatever energy, they can even have hydropower if they can access the source to it. However, that is not the priority because that represents 1%, if up to 1% of the population. 99% who, I use the figure 2K, are waking up to look for daily 2K are the people we should be focusing on. Now, to speak of, okay, the White House has solar, and I believe there were a number of other examples that came out. That's why I made the point of energy security. The United States is a net exporter of energy, meaning they produce more than they can consume domestically. So, you know, we need to be careful not to compare apples with oranges.
Exactly.
And while we're aspiring to become evolve into, to become more like the more developed nations and aspirational nations and so forth, let's not put the cart before the horse. Let's imitate productive things that are supportive, and let's imitate social security for our people. Let's imitate access to healthcare, free education, clean running water. I think those are the things we should be attempting to emulate before we get to, solar power for those who, if their books balance well, will be able to pay their electricity. I know the electricity bill at Aso Villa is not, just because of this administration. It's a legacy issue.
Yes.
However, let's start learning that lesson of cutting our coat according to our size so that we can pay our electricity bill in the presidential villa and allocate resources towards all these other vulnerable areas of society that actually desperately need energy.
Desperately need the energy.